only countries in the world I could find where pornography was illegal was in Muslim countries. The only countries I could find in the world where riba and fiat currency were illegal were in Muslim countries. The only place I could find in the world where you weren't pushed this atheism, nihilistic, you're worthless idea that we come from nothing was Muslim countries. And I started to realize that the enemy of my enemy was in fact my friend. The same people who want to send me to war, put me in debt, and turn my wife into a prostitute, they were the same people that were telling me Islam was bad. And then I realized that the whole anti-Muslim propaganda that we've been fed in the West was a trick. And it was to get us to go to war and pick up a gun and shoot our fellow brothers under Allah for banks, because Muslims would not take sodomy, they would not take pornography, they would not take usury and riba. And I realized that's all the Afghanistan war was, that's all the Iraq war was, this is all the American wars against Muslim countries was just because Muslims would not accept haram.
H.G. Wells says the one world government must be the sole landowner on Earth. In his book, After Democracy, Wells clearly said that once one world economic order is established through the International Monetary Fund and the Bank of International Settlements, political and social order will be imposed. In the case of the United States, the plan isn't to overthrow the U.S. government or its constitution, but to make it negligible. This has largely been accomplished by slowly and carefully implementing the Socialist Manifesto written in 1920 by the Fabian Society, which was based on the Communist Manifesto of 1848. The U.S. government violates the Constitution on almost a daily basis with total impunity. Executive orders such as going to war without a declaration of war, as in the Gulf War, has worked to make the Constitution negligible. Executive orders are only proclamations which the president has no power or authority to make. Only a king can make proclamations. In 1945, the U.S. Senate was handed the United Nations Treaty and were given only 3 days to read and understand the implications of this treaty. Not only were the senators not given an adequate amount of time to read the treaty, but they did not understand the document, therefore should have never voted on it. Had they actually understood and properly debated the document, it surely would have been rejected. Apart from other considerations, the document was so poorly written, so vague, deceptive, and contradictory, it could have been rejected on those grounds alone. A law, which is what a treaty is, must be clearly written and unambiguous. The UN treaty was far from that. The United States, bound by its Constitution, cannot ratify the UN treaty for the following reasons. Number one, our Constitution rests upon the bedrock of sovereignty, without which there can be no Constitution. U.S. foreign policy is based on Vattel's Law of Nations, which makes sovereignty the issue. Although the Constitution is silent on world government and foreign bodies, when the Constitution is silent of a power, it is not incidental to another power in the Constitution. Then it is an inhibition of that power, or prohibition of that power. Number two, the United Nations is not a sovereign body, having no measurable territory of its own. It is housed in the U.S. territory in New York in a building loaned by the Rockefellers. Under the U.S. Constitution, we cannot make a treaty with any nation or body that lacks sovereignty. The U.S. can make an agreement with a country or body having no sovereignty, but can never enter into a treaty with a body lacking in sovereignty. Number three, for the Senate to have attempted to ratify a treaty with a body state or country lacking of sovereignty, defined boundaries, demographics, a currency system, a set of laws, or a constitution, namely the United Nations, was to betray the oath to uphold the Constitution, which senators are sworn to do. This is called treason. Number four, in order for the United States to become a member of the United Nations, 2 amendments to the Constitution would have to be passed. The First Amendment would have to recognize that a world body exists. In its present form, the Constitution cannot recognize the United Nations as a world body. A Second Amendment would have to say that the United Nations can have a treaty relationship with an unsovereign world body. Neither amendment was ever offered, much less accepted by the Senate and ratified by all states. Thus, the thoroughly suspect United Nations Treaty was never a legal law in the United States. As matters stood in 1945 and as it stands today, although a president has the power to have a say in foreign affairs, he does not have the power, nor has he ever had the power, to make an agreement, much less a treaty, with the world body. This absolutely means that no other world body, specifically the United Nations, has jurisdiction to deploy American servicemen and women, or to order the United States to act outside of the constitutional restrictions imposed by our founding fathers.